adoption. For the avoidance of doubt, let's be sure that we are all talking about the same thing. So we're talking about when a couple or a person becomes the legal parent of another person, usually a minor, and then they become in-law their parent, right? It's different from fosterage, which is very common in Ghana. Someone lives with you, you look after them, for whatever reason you have that arrangement, you look after them, they live with you until their adulthood. At their wedding, they call their mother and you come up and, you know, that's fosterage. There's no legal obligation and no legal relationship. Here we're talking about adoption proper. Now, there are two types of adoption in Ghana. There's customary adoption and statutory adoption. I don't like the terms formal and informal. It suggests that customary law is a kind of unserious conversation type thing. The connotations of informal I don't like. So I didn't choose formal. I call it statutory and customary. Now, customary adoption is achieved according to the rules of the society that the parents belong to. Of course, even that is vague, because is it the rules of the intending parent or of the original parent? I probably would weigh in on the side of the original parents, because it must be valid there, right? And so you must know them, and if you ended up in court, you would have to prove those rules. You can't assume. We're very different peoples. The way the Akans do things is not the way that the Gonja do things. So you can't assume that the court would know the rules. So you tend to have to prove that these are the rules of customary adoption. Even so, the court has come to certain essentials that it will look for in wherever you are from, it doesn't matter. It will look for those to say there was a valid customary adoption or not. The statutory version is governed by the Children's Act 1998 as amended in 2016, the adoption regulations of 2018, the adoption rules CI 42, and the High Court Civil Procedure Rules CI 47. That's the regime. We won't go into the details. How do you adopt? At custom, the courts have expressed 3 requirements that they must find before they will say that a customary adoption was validly held. The first is an express intention to adopt publicly expressed. So it's an express intention to adopt, and that intention is publicly expressed. The second is the express consent of the original parent publicly given. Now, it is the express here is kind of repetitive, but it's important. It's not consent that, oh, but we can all see you want to adopt. You must actually state, I intend to adopt this child. And the original parents cannot, you cannot say, oh, but when I told them, they said, hey, or they brought their child, oh, but I've been paying the child's school fees. It doesn't count. We require express consent, publicly given, and then witnesses. Now, you would think that publicly given covers the witnesses bit. It doesn't, because if I stand on the street and I announce, I will adopt this child, I have made a public announcement. There may be nobody on the street, but I didn't do it in private, so it's a public announcement. And therefore, the requirement of witnesses is separate from the publicity of your intention. They are the people who will attest to having heard it, but the fact that you are standing in a public place when you express your intention will not suffice. So that's important. A statutory adoption is achieved when you acquire a valid adoption order from a court of competent jurisdiction that has followed the set procedure. Now, the procedure is too involved for me to get into today, but just know that it's a process that is heavily supervised by the state. And so the court's decision is heavily influenced by the Department of Social Welfare's report or position on your application. For ease of reference, let's do similarities first. What's similar between the two regimes, customary and statutory? The first is the implications of adoption. An adoption ends all the duties, but also all the rights of the previous parents. So you don't have, when it's a proper adoption as opposed to a fosterage, you don't have a situation where after 15 years of being my child, you see the child is getting married and they ask for the mother to give the, I don't know, the token to the mother, and then you get up, I'm actually the one who had her. No, you don't exist. Adoption is final that way. You gave up your duties, lucky you, but you also gave up your rights. And that is true whether it is a customary adoption or it's a statutory adoption. The second thing is that it's binding, and that's different from the ending of the duties in the sense that you can't change your mind. You can't adopt a person, whether under customary law or under state law, and after 4 years say, what a horrid child, maybe I go back. You can't do that. Unfortunately, they are your child now. The other thing that's similar between them is that neither customary adoption nor statutory adoption can be done unilaterally or secretly. Now, in customary adoption, you may not actually be present. If you think of the way we do customary marriages, you can have your family go on your behalf to arrange the marriage. You may not be personally present, but they will know who their child is marrying, even if they haven't seen you before. They will just know who. Customary adoptions can be done that way. So the person who is adopting may not be physically present or physically known, but it is impossible for the family to give up their child to a certain person in the world. They would have to know who that person is, who their family is, and where they're coming from, right? So it can't be secret. In law, it's even in statutory law, it's even more firm. Social welfare must be satisfied that you are of suitable character and means to adopt. You may be a really good person who can't feed themselves. It was always one of the things that really puzzled me when I was in school abroad, that you so frequently find homeless people with dogs. Now, I understand the need for love and care, but I just found it so odd. You can't take care of yourself. Why do you have a dog? And my Western friends kept explaining the loneliness of homelessness, and I understood that. But you have a dog and you can't eat your own food. Oh. So I completely approve of social welfare checking whether you are of not just suitable character, but suitable means to adopt a child. Now, one of the things that it's looking out for is to ensure that the state does not inadvertently create a slave trading route. Every 3 years you come and you adopt a new child. As for me, I love children. I'm a mother of many. Only to find that you are offloading them on the back end via slave trade. So that's why they check your character and your means. It doesn't mean, when I say that they can't be secret, it doesn't mean that they are public. They are in camera, because these are important matters. These are identity issues. There are children involved. So we can't sit it on CCTV and have callers giving their opinion about the hairstyle of the woman and whether she will make a good mother or no. We're making a decision that is basically changing the bloodlines of people. It's an important moment, so we do it in camera. The court will allow anyone that the court thinks is relevant to the application to be present, but it's not a spectator moment. And the other thing that they have in common, which is a good thing, even if it's a little annoying when you are in the shoes of the parent, is that it's a slow process. Now, for customary adoptions, just because our customary law practices are oral, doesn't mean that it can be done quickly. Like one evening, you sit at Loggia, you have some nice beer and kebab, you really enjoy it, then you call the kebab man, Charlie, I go adopt your pikin, I go take him go Babylon. And then you declare, I have made a public intention to, no. At customary law, you must notify the family. And as we do in marriage issues, the family will take their time. The parents will consider what you're offering, whether they should give up these rights. It's not because it's oral, then 5 minutes later, we've handed over the child and it's done. Similarly, in statutory adoption, you must notify the Department of Social Welfare at least 3 months before the court is empowered even to give you an adoption order. I have known people who have flown into Ghana just to adopt and have found it a very annoying and an irritating rule and thought, it's so inconvenient, but you've got to understand the importance and the finality of what you're doing. I think 3 months, if you can't spare 3 months for this process, you probably shouldn't be doing it. So as annoying as it might be when you are in the process, keep an eye on the fact that the state is looking out for the best interest of the child and for the finality of the process. And even though, as you will see in a moment, an adoption order can be revoked, it's the last thing anybody wants. You were once this person's child, now you are no more. It's not necessary, so it's better to take our time and do it properly. So those are the things that the two regimes have in common. But if you're going to make a choice, be aware that where they bifurcate is in very important ways. So we're going to talk about the differences now. Now, in customary law, adoption is final. The process with the public process of handing over the child is done, and that's it. In statutory adoption, it is potentially final because the court can revoke the order because you don't get to take the child and bounce, and that's it. Because thanks to the amendment to the Children's Act in 2016, there's a 5-year monitoring requirement where the state checks for 5 years to be sure they've made the right choice for this child. And note, it's for this child and their children and their children's children. That's, you are who their children are going to call grandma. They should be right, right? So you have a monitoring process. The court can also give the order with specified conditions. So they can give a conditioned order. They can say, here's your child, go. Or they can say, here's your child, let's see what you've done with them in 3 weeks. Let's make sure that this child's nutrition is up, or we'll revoke the order. If the court can do that. The customary law parent cannot say, I'll give you my child, but you have to show me that their vitamin A deficiency has been cured within the next 6 weeks. They can't do that. It's very final. To that extent, I think, in the greater interest of the child, the statutory regime is kinder, because what if the parents were wrong, right? And then in customary law, who can adopt? Anyone, at any age. So you can be a 75-year-old man who suddenly decides, I wish I'd had kids. I'm going to adopt one. And then you can. You meet the requirements, here's your child. In statutory law, we do not take quite so generous an approach, because in the 21st century, raising children is a lot more work than it was 100 years ago. It's a lot more involving. It's not enough to make a paycheck payment every month. So we have put an upper limit to the age at which we think it'll be feasible for a person to be a good adopted parent. And so the adopting, the floor is 25, and the ceiling is 55. But if you are related to the child you're trying to adopt, then at 21 you can adopt them. In either case, the adopting parent must be at least 21 years older than the child they're adopting, which means if you're trying to adopt a 5-year-old, it's not enough that you are over 21 yourself. You must actually be 26 at least. There's logic to that. It's very rare that you meet at least a Ghanaian person of age 21, maybe 25, of substantial financial means and unparalleled wisdom. I consider myself a wise person. I've been flattered by others that I am, and I like the flattery, so I tend to go with it. And I like to think of myself as having always been wise. There are those who challenge that, and some of them have good reason. But I married young, and I had children young, and I did not think at the time that I had my first son, I was 25 when I had my first son, I did not think that I lacked the wisdom to be a particularly impactful parent. But now, nearly 20 years later, I think of some of the things that I did in my early motherhood days, and I know I would not do them now. In fact, I didn't do them with my last son. So it tells me that even at 25, I did not have the profound wisdom that I thought I did, which means that if I were adopting a 5-year-old when I was 25, I would have been wrong about how well I was positioned to raise them. So although that gap seems a bit arbitrary, it's not. It's actually quite wise for it to be 21 minutes. 21 years. Thank you. He tells me I have 1 minute. Luckily, I don't have that many more things to say. Oh, I can talk really fast. Another thing that's different is that in customary law, males can adopt anyone. But under statutory law, if a male wanted to adopt by himself, he could only adopt his own son. One would have questions, but why would he be adopting his son if it were his son? Have you never heard of the people who declared, it was me, it was never me? For whatever reason, it is possible for a man to need to adopt his son. And the court, if the court thinks that under the circumstances an order is warranted, they will allow a male to adopt their own son. But otherwise, you notice their daughter cannot be adopted. I'll leave that to the gender activists to push. The other thing you should note is that customary law allows you to adopt a foreigner, a foreign child. So in the landmark case on customary adoption, Tano and Akosia Koko, the adopting parent was Asante and the adopted child was Krobo. That's fine. In statutory law, you can only adopt if you are a Ghanaian. You can only adopt Ghanaians if you're a Ghanaian. So that might explain why Brad and Angelina did not come here. Now, in law, if the child is old enough to be consulted, they must be. But the court must operate always on what Iris was telling you about, that overarching principle, the welfare principle. It must be in the best interest of the child. Similarly, an adopted child must be told they are adopted once they are above age 14, if it is in their interest. If it is not, then hush. At customary law, you don't ever tell the child. They don't need to. They used to be from here, they're not from there anymore. What are we going to do with people from there? And it's kind of in line with the way that we have customarily created internal cohesion among peoples. If you ask Asantis where they are from, they'll tell you they were dropped down from in a basin or something like that. The point is to avoid the divisiveness of knowing I am from here, you are from here, and that's why at custom they don't tell an adopted child where they were originally from. And then, gosh, I have to decide whether I want to do the differences or I want to give you a head note about the surrogacy. So I'll say the last thing that I'll say about the differences is that in legislated adoption, the child must have spent at least 3 months with you before the court will be comfortable handing the child over to you permanently. That's not so at custom. At custom, you can come in and announce, oh, I want to adopt this baby who was born last week, whatever, and they can hand them over to you. The legislated one requires the court to be certain it's unlikely to change its mind. So it likes to see that you've interacted with the child, you think you can live with the child, and the court is convinced that you can love this child. And so that's what they do. I will end on a note about surrogacy, which has become quite common and popular in Ghana. And the Registration of Births and Deaths Act 2020, Act 1027, requires intending parents to adopt the child that was born to them through a surrogate. It doesn't say whether they must adopt if the child, well, it doesn't say if it makes a difference if the child is biologically related to them. So they use the sperm and the egg of the intended parents and the surrogate just carried it. It's wiser to just adopt, do the adoption process. Now, intending parents, an intending mom can apply up to 12 weeks in the gestation period for a pre-birth adoption order. In that circumstance, the court will require all of the requirements of normal adoption except the consent of the birth mother, because at the time, they are your surrogate. If you don't do it before then your choice, the only option is to do it when the child is born. The challenge with that is that the Act defines mother as birth mom. Now note that the consent of the parents to cease to be a parent is required for an adoption to be legally valid. So if after the child is born, the surrogate decides, I like this kid, then they have a kid. So if you're going to go by surrogacy, let me advise you to do the pre-birth registration. It's the easiest and the tidiest one. And the honest truth is the court allowed that to be possible because it can happen that upon birth, it turns out the surrogate mother is a better mother for the child. I can't imagine what circumstance, but it is possible. And so the child legally yours. The court must make the child legally yours. There's a lot of shady institutions offering surrogacy services these days. Please don't just stop there. I saw one around Rollins Park in Manila that said it was promoting racial integration by providing people with biracial surrogacy services. So just because they can help you get a baby doesn't mean they can help you have a child in law. Take the steps to do the right thing. I'm going to end now because he's been standing here for a minute, and say that adoption is a wonderful option in the world for people who can't have their own kids, or who for some reason want to have a child that they didn't bear. So it's something that we should make space for in our legal order. But it is also, like many things, capable of being abused and causing a lot of harm and stress. So it makes sense that the state has taken such a firm interest in how it is done. There was nothing to prevent in customary law when you're having a child, taking your adopted child and moving to the other side of the planet and beating them every day. The state would like to help us avoid that. So even though you can do it in customary law, and even though it is perfectly legal, let me end by encouraging people to go the statutory